Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. So, over the past week, I have taken part in the Brackeys 2024.1 Game Jam, and whilst I tried to record devlogs every day, I got 3 days in and then got distracted working on the game instead, so that kind of failed. So what I've decided to do instead is almost a breakdown of the game I made. If you've not seen the game, links in the description for you to watch the video or play the game. If you've made a game, let me know what you've made, I'll play your game. But I figured I'd run over some of the concepts of my game, because I find myself playing games and then almost questioning how some things have been made or how I personally will go about making it. It's always a unique take to see somebody else's interpretation of how they made something, because you can either borrow ideas or adapt from it. So today we're going to run through my game, Time Gladiators, and I'm going to touch on some of the key bits I've made in the game, and then in future if you want any other ideas from the game, let me know and we'll make a second video. So let's get started. So if you've not actually seen my game yet, so the gist of it is, you woke up in this dungeon here, which is why the door's open. You come out, there's roaring crowds everywhere, and the king, which is the pirate king up here, because everybody loves pirate kings, has basically made a gladiator arena with people from all over the universe, and the Time Centurion, which is this chap here, basically is an alien enslaved by this pirate king who can go back and steal people throughout time, kind of thing. So for the first 5 battles, you fight World War II soldiers. The next battle, you fight a bounty hunter from the year 30 something, I think it's 3050, and then after that you fight an alien from years and years away, kind of thing. That's the gist of it. So you're like a 2099 bounty hunter and you fight all these different people. It's a dead simple shooting game. The first thing I'll start off talking about is how did I manage to simulate all of these NPCs without, dropping performance, because if all of these are blueprint NPCs, surely my performance would tank. And if we have a look at how many NPCs there are, there's nearly 2,000 NPCs. That's beating Grand Theft Auto 6's NPC count on the beach, right? No, I've cheated. So the first in a ring are actually NPCs. That's these guys who, for some reason, collision didn't work right. That's all of these guys here. They're all actual NPCs. The guys behind them are fake. They're just planes. Look, every single one. If I come up here, look, half the NPCs have disappeared. So yes, that's how I faked it. The initial plan was to have these guys at the front animate their proper ones, because if you come and stand here, you can see these guys. Whereas the other ones, look, you can't see what they're doing. You can't see it at all. But the original plan was to use Unreal's flipbook effect and make these animate to basically move their arms and stuff and just play basic animations. So from a distance, it basically is LOD effect, level of detail. You can't tell. And up there, you can't tell at all. But the shadow of them, the effect, it sells really well. It makes it look like a full arena. You might be asking, how did I manage to get all of these images here? And no, I didn't painstakingly go through and print screen all of these, although that probably would have been faster in hindsight. I instead wrote a very complicated blueprint that went over and took screenshots of them all instead, and it drops it into this crowd images folder here. You can see I've got all of these different images, and it's literally just a screenshot. Let me go to the alpha of the character. That's it. So it basically found all of the actual NPCs here, crowd NPC, stuck a camera directly in front of them, cropped out everything so only they were available to the camera, used a render texture to take the picture, and then I used Unreal's export image or export texture to save it. So here's the basic setup for it. I have the equipment capture, which is basically where it captures them, and then I have the material where it stores the render texture, and then it basically exports it out. This material instance is basically what all of these are populated by. So if we take a quick look at this equipment capture, all it is a spring arm with a scene capture, which is right there in the camera. It basically puts that at the root of the person there, and I've moved the camera up. So if I was to drag this out and drop it, say, right there, I copied the rotation from the character, which in this case will be 90, and it basically did that. And because it cropped everything out, you didn't see the poles or anything, and it only showed that character. And then what it does is inside here, when you click start process, which is a custom event I've got, so I basically set how many images I want it to take when I drop that camera in. So I set that to something like 300, and then it loops over it. Every image it finds, it randomizes the NPC, so every time it's looping around them. No, that's not right. And actually, ladies and gentlemen, as I was just explaining to this, that is actually incorrect. It used to originally go over all these NPCs, so it takes a screenshot, move along, take a screenshot, move along, take a screenshot. so. That was version 1, but it was proving to be buggy, and I couldn't get it to work. And because I was randomizing the NPCs every time I went across, I actually improved it by just making it use one NPC. So what it does is it comes in when I've set the amount of images I want, it randomizes the NPC, removes how many images, so if I've got 300, I've now got 299. Then it calls initialize, which is a function up here, which basically gets the pawn I want to take the picture of, which I manually set in the inspector. Then it only shows that pawn, then it sets the lighting channels on it, so it just sets it up basically. And then it comes into here, it waits for a moment because for some reason, after you set up the render texture, it's not an immediate thing, so you have to give it a delay. And then it renders the target to a static texture, which basically prints out the crowd images here. So it printed it out in a folder, and then I called start process, which came back and loop until it finished. That's pretty much it. And that managed to spit out all of these crowd pictures here. And then all I did is on the billboard here, which is just another blueprint, I've got this randomized function that it literally just loops over all of the different ones. And if you get up close, they are actually terrible quality, as you can see. But like from a distance, you can't tell at all. So all that does on this version is when you construct it, it randomizes it. It connects to a data table I've set up, which I've just manually imported the CSV of all the images, as you can see, because it's actually quicker. The reason I've used the data table is if we wanted to store all those images in memory, we're going to have to store all of those images always in memory, or make this remove a variable that it no longer needs, but the variable is going to be taken up memory. So I use the data table because the data table, you load it, then it loads it. If you stop using it, it stops using it. So at that point, it's just storage space on disk, which is fine. So it basically gets all the data tables of the materials, randomizes over them, sets the materials. That's it. That's pretty much all it does. So that's a really quick way I've managed to achieve large scale crowds with nothing. Like I said, the original plan was to eventually use flipbooks of it. So what I was going to do for each NPC is I was going to take multiple pictures. So for example, if I wanted it to be, I don't know, 15 frames per second for the animation, I would have got this picture, took a picture of them idle, told it to play the montage of waving hands, and then every, I don't know, 1 divided by 15 seconds or however many for FPS I want it, take another picture of them playing the animation. So for each character I would have had, say, 15 images. Then I was going to look online and find a way to combine them into a sprite sheet, so then I can stick it on Flipboard. That indeed would have been much better, because then all of these would have been animated as well, and I could have done loads of different versions of it, and they would have waved their arms and stuff like that. It would have been so cool, but I ran out of time, so I couldn't do that. Now the next thing you might ask is, just while we're on the crowds, is how did I spawn all of the NPCs here? Did I manually hand place them? They look very random. No. Haha. Again, I wasted more time than I had, and I created a crowd spawning system. So all this does, it's a spline that you drag out. So you can see my little spline down here, and every single row's got one, as you can see, except that one because I got bored doing it. And every single row has one, and you basically give it the type of class to spawn. So it's either going to be a BP crowd NPC, which is the billboards, or an actual NPC for the up close ones. And then you tell it how many you want to spawn, and it keeps track of how many it's loaded and stuff. So all this does is use a nice little function to loop over the spline. So if I spawn it, it gets the look at point, which is just, I just stuck that in the middle. It's just so they're all facing in the middle of the arena. So like if you walk over here, these guys don't face you. That is a glitch, but it's a performance tweak I'm not too overly fussed about. And then it basically removes all the crowd, loops over the amount I need to spawn, divides the spline's length by the amount I want to spawn. So if your spline's length is 2000 and I want to spawn 10, it's to divide 2000 by 10 and then multiply it by whatever index. So if I'm going up in increments of a 20, it's to go 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, all the way until the end of it. And then I just get the location and then spawn the actor there. That's it. That's all it does. And I can't remember what that one does. I think that's old, so we ignored that. But you can basically see, if I were to drag this out a minute, just so it's not going to affect those ones, and if I've got my spline here, I can really come in and just do any random shape I want. And then all I do is click spawn crowd, and boom, there we go. We've now got crowd spawn. There's a weird glitch where for some reason the scale's off. So you can see it messes up. I just manually set the scale to 1 then 2 again. That fixed it. You can see if I come down here and just select all this crowd, I don't know what this issue is. If I set it 2 and then back to 1, it works. And there, we've now got a crowd following a point. It's super easy. It only ever runs in the editor. You don't run it in the game. But yeah, that's how I spawn classes. And I can come in, I can click delete. They're all gone. I can come and instead select my crowd NPC image, I think, and click spawn, and you can see now I've got billboarded ones. Nice and simple. I can delete, spawn, and I can even set it to some ridiculously high number, and it'll lag a minute, but it will spawn that. Look at that for a crowd. Imagine if that was watching you. But what I've also done is made it randomize the distance and location as well. If I delete this off, you'll see around these NPCs, they're not just every 20 increments, because then it'd be too uniform, and it looked weird. So like these guys, they look like they're friends because they're still close together and there's a big gap either side. And the way I did that was literally basically just adding some randomness here. So as we take the vector where it needs to spawn, so every 20 increments, I just minus or 100 randomly onto the edge of it and add that up there. The z-axis always remains the same because otherwise it'll break. And then, yeah, that's it. For this scale, I did ever so slightly scaled as well, but you can't actually tell. But like all these characters are actually the same size. So like, yeah, here, he's taller than these are and they're all in floor. But I just wanted to add some variation to it. So the next thing I'm cracking on to is the door. The door system is pretty unique that I've got here. If we just start the game. So this door here, or all of the doors really, are quite unique because they are properly coded to function as doors. So you can come in, I've got these open and close door things. If I play the game and click open, it will animate down. If I click close, the door will close, pretty much. But that's not the only thing the door does, because it's fully controlled from the editor if I want to open it. So for example, this door here, I open that because that's where the player first walks out. But it's also got extra bits on it to make it work in the game. So for example, when I open and close the door, all it does is play the door opening sound, open to a location with a timeline and close again. That's pretty much it. It's probably overkill because I could have just used the reverse node, but it does it if I wanted to change it. Where it actually gets unique is when it's finished opening or closing the door, it calls delegates to say it's open or closed. So this means when I spawn my NPCs, I randomly pick a door every single time. So say in here, and the NPC spawns at the red arrow or around it, because I've set the spawner, which we'll look at later, to spawn at the red arrow. If you can't spawn, move the location slightly. So if you spawn 60 enemies, there's only like 8 or 9 doors, so it won't be able to spawn all 6 in here, so it moves it along. If it physically can't spawn it, then it'll probably spawn it outside, but that's fine. It never gets that bad because you die too quick anyway. So yeah, so what it does is it spawns the enemies there, and in order to make the enemies walk out, which was a cool feature, it calls NPC door exit once it's spawned all the waves. So it goes through, spawns all the enemies inside the gates, then it calls NPC door exit on every door. The first thing it does is check if it's got any actors who need to exit. So when I spawn it, I populate the actors to exit, saying these are all the enemies that need to spawn. And then if it's got any, because if you're on level 1, it's going to call all 8 doors and say spawn this. And you might think, why not just log the doors that I'm spawning? I'll let you know that on the wave spawner section. But then it basically comes in, if it hasn't got any actors, then it checks if the door's open and closes it. So that takes care of the player's open door, or if a door glitches out or something. And then it comes in if the door's open. So this one here calls this event down here if it's already open. If it's not open, then it comes down here, binds to the on door opener delegate that we set up above, and then opens the door. So basically either way, if it's open or not, it calls this. So that handles if you've got 2 actors walking out, the first actor will trigger the door open because it'll come in, is it open? No. Open the door, bind here, do whatever it needs to do. Then the second actor comes out, the door's already open, so it just calls the door open event, which comes down here. So it's a little bypass for that. And then it basically comes in, it gets the exit point, which is the green arrow here. I was a bit stuffed for time to try and figure out a decent way of telling them to walk out, so I've literally just put an arrow and said walk to here, and every door's got an arrow, so it works. So I say walk to the point there, and then when it's failed, I tell it to reopen the door again. So say if they can't get there, say if it glitches out, frame jumps or something, I was having a bit of that, it tells it to just reopen it again. And then I start the logic, which is for my state tree. I remove the actor from it and then call NPC door exit, which comes back up here again and then does the loop again. So if I've got 5 enemies, they'll all run through, and the final enemy will finally come down here and close the door. And that's my dead simple door system. It works incredibly well. So like if I can get a guy on camera, so you can see he's walked out and the door's closed. How cool is that? So yes, that's what I wanted. I wanted that ability of hidden doors and then people walk out, because then it, you know, it looks cool. And because I've modeled the doors to have a black plane inside them, like if I just come in, I've literally just put black planes in. You can see, can't see. Yeah, you can see, look, each room is just a black plane so you can't see inside of it, because then it looks very ominous. Like if you were to walk up here and try to look in, you can't see anything properly, and plus you're going to be attacked all the time. So yeah, so they'll just randomly spawn in here, the door will open, and one by one they'll march out and get you, which is pretty cool. The game never got to the part where you'd have like 5 or 6 enemies coming out of each door, because I was tweaking the difficulty, because at one point it was too easy, you know, a couple of shots and they're dead and you barely took any damage. Other times the game was way too hard, so tweaking the difficulty. There's an infinite mode that you can play, which I'll talk about later, but yeah, I doubt many people are going to get to that. But yeah, that's the door. So let's talk about the wave spawner system then, because this is a unique one that actually went wrong and then went incredibly right, which is odd. So we have this blueprint actor component called wave spawner that I've stuck on my player controller, and it's actually undergone quite a few changes. So the first time I did this, I was doing an infinite wave spawner. So I did some research on how to calculate the waves to spawn, and the best one I found was the Fibonacci sequence. So this very small graphic here is the Fibonacci sequence, and I've slightly modified it, but basically it takes the previous two and adds them together. So you'll first you spawn 0, which we don't have 0, so we skip that wave, so we start at 1. Then it's 1 plus 0 is 1, so it spawns 1 enemy. And the next time it's 1 plus 1 equals 2, so then there's 2 enemies. And then it goes 1, 2 plus 1, 3 plus 2, 5 plus 3, and that's how the waves in my game are calculated. It uses the Fibonacci sequence because it was dead easy to add in. So that was the original purpose of the game. You just have a random enemy come out to do with the Fibonacci sequence, and it randomized between all the enemies. But then the story named the NPCs, which you can't randomize NPCs in a game. If they're named, it doesn't work, because if 2 Sheldons come out, it kind of doesn't work. So I went through and wrote this entire wave spawner system and then almost scrapped it because I couldn't use it. And then thankfully I came back in and then did actually end up using it. So what it does is it first comes in and it has to delay for a moment because for some reason the doors weren't being initialized. I think the player controller initializes itself first, which then initializes all its components, which was going to try and find the door. But then because the doors weren't initialized, because the player controller was initialized first, it was erroring when it was trying to use doors. So instead it delays just a couple of frames while the cutscene's playing, so you never notice anyway, and then it stores the doors for later use. So there's a couple of functions down here. I'm not actually going to talk about those just yet. So depending on which way you come into the game, you've got 2 modes. You've got story mode and infinite mode. The story mode is a full narrative dialogue one. You do a fight, the king speaks, you do a fight, the king speaks. The infinite mode scraps all that. It's literally the Fibonacci sequence wave generator, and it'll just come out. The NPCs aren't named, kind of. They are named when they speak, but that's fine. They'll come out, you kill them, they come out, and that's all the point of it is. So we'll go over the infinite one first. I've called free roam because it's dead easy. So you come in to start wave, and I've basically created an event that calls it to run. Every time you start the infinite mode or the story mode, it plays a cutscene with the king talking to you. The story mode says welcome to the arena, blah 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 blah, and then at the end of his dialogue it says start the spawning. And then the infinite spawner, it does the same thing, but it says start the infinite spawner, which is called start wave. It gets how many enemies are alive, so that's the enemy count, because if an enemy dies it calls start wave again, but if the enemies haven't all died yet, then it needs to wait until they're dead. And then it comes along, it updates the HUD to show wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. So it binds on wave complete, which is a delegate I've set up down here, and then it just says spawn the enemies, which starts this event down here. But the delegate on wave complete basically just unbinds itself, sets the current wave, so wave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It removes all the old enemies, which basically comes in, gets all the enemies, deletes their actors, so their bodies aren't piling up, because I've not built for that. And then it starts the wave, which comes back over here and runs it. So every time the wave's complete, it starts the wave, comes back, checks if the enemies are dead, if there's a glitch or something. But coming down to the actual spawning, so it gets all the unlocked enemies. So this is something I wanted in my game. I wanted the enemy types to be progressive. I didn't want all the enemies to be available at first. You don't want the big bad guy to come out, who's the hardest boss in the game, on your first try. That's not fair. So it should build up to it. So what I did is this very basic data table that gives you a wave, and then it'll spawn all enemies in your current wave and below. So if you're on wave 1, it will just come in here and it'll spawn American soldier or German soldier, the dead basic ones. And then 2, 3, 4, it will just spawn those. At number 5, it will switch and start spawning Raven Blackwood as well as those two. And then when you get to 10, it will also spawn Glob, which unfortunately didn't make it into the game. So that's all it does. It pretty much just loops over the data table and stores all of those enemy classes there. And then this is actually something I found out in Unreal, and I've never experienced this before, which is partially why I'm doing this video as well. Using async assets to load things you don't need in memory all the time is a fantastic way of coding because it's so much more memory efficient. However, it's not fantastic in for loops, because I didn't know this. A for loop doesn't wait for the async load asset to complete. I thought it would have, but it doesn't. So as soon as you call async load asset, say if it takes a minute, it's going to come back to the for loop and stack this up, another one, and then call for loop completed, even though none of the assets have loaded. I didn't know that. That's quite a shock to me. So that caused a lot of bugs until I found it out. So what I've had to badly do until I can find a better way of doing it, but it is a game jam, I only had a week, is every time it calls load asset, it just lets the for loop run past itself and complete with nothing. And then what it horribly does is check if the enemy is loaded is the exact same as the unlocked enemies. As soon as that's correct, when this completes, then it comes down and spawns the enemies. It's not fantastic, but the benefit of this is it means I only keep these loaded enemies in memory until the next round. So I basically load them in memory, spawn the enemies, drop them from memory, wait until you've played the game with nothing in memory, spawn them up, load them up, do it that quick. It's a nice performant efficient cycle, I believe. There's no major lag spikes, so I think it's pretty good. So once the enemies have been loaded, it gets the amount of enemies it needs to spawn, sets it, loops over the enemies, and creates the enemy, going create, spawning a random one each time. This is for the infinite mode, remember. The create enemy is a generic function both story and normal use. Quite hefty, but basically it comes in, it loops through, it checks if we've actually got doors, so it logs all the unused doors and then sets. So this is what I meant about the doors earlier with it being a bit specific. If you have 9 doors here and you spawn 9 enemies, if you call random door every single time, I don't know the statistics of it, but you are never going to get an even spread of 9 doors, ever, because it will always give you another door. So if you call random on this door 9 times versus every other one, there's a chance this might not be called at all. There's also a chance it might be called more than once. And I didn't want a wave of 9 enemies, potentially 2 of them coming out of the same game. That's just weird. I wanted it to be evenly spread across them, but I still wanted to retain the randomness because I wanted it to be random. A lot of the game here is random NPCs, random voices, random lines, everything. So what I opted to do instead is I get all of the doors, I store it in an array, and then I use a door via random. So I pick a random door, so say we'll pick this one, and then I remove it from the array and then pick another random one. So say this one, and then that one, then that one, until the array is empty. After I've used up all my doors, if I've still got enemies to spawn, I will then repopulate the unused door array with the actual doors that need to be spawned, and then repeat the process again. So then that gives me a truly random door generation system where enemies will only come out of the doors twice if there's enough enemies to do so. I hope that makes sense. That's what this function here does. It basically gets the unused doors. If there's more than one door, then it selects a random door. If there's not more than one door, because there's no doors left, then it resets the variable and then picks another random one. That's all it does, and then that removes the door I've picked. The next part is it spawns the enemy, so it gets the chosen door, gets the chosen door, spawns the enemy at the exit point. It should have been yeah. So it basically spawns the enemy at the chosen door's spawn location, rotates them so they're facing the exit point, so they're all crowding around. In the end, it didn't really matter, you never see it, but I thought it'd be cool if you could. And then it comes in, when they die, it calls enemy died, which we'll look at in a moment, but after that, it increases the amount of enemies that spawn, and then adds to the chosen door's actors to exit, which is what we covered earlier. So if I go to enemy died here, it basically removes the enemy from the enemy count, and then checks if it needs to call wave complete. So every time an enemy dies, it says, have we completed this wave here? And that's pretty much the enemy died, which is called from the create enemy. And then after that, it calls enemy spawn. And this is the part where it initializes the doors to say, start making people walk out. So NPC door exits loops over all of my doors, every single one, calls the NPC door exit function, which tells all the NPCs to start walking out, open the door and stuff like that. And then it makes a log of all the enemies that I have spawned just at the end while it's doing it. I could have done that earlier, to be honest. And then it loops over them and it tries to play their spawn sound. So not all the enemies have a spawn sound, but that's basically a dialogue. They come out and go, here I am, me, kind of thing. And then it tries to do it. This will only allow them to play one, so it pretty much plays the first one. I don't know why it's done this bad, to be honest. Yeah, this entire function I don't need, looking back at it now. I think I was trying to do more than I really should have. In the end, I could have just picked a random enemy and said spawn. But yes, that pretty much just plays their sound, so when they walk out, they go, hoorah, I'm here to attack people, kind of thing. And that's pretty much the free roam thing. So yeah, it's pretty decent. The only thing I will show is the get enemy to spawn count. That's the part that actually uses the Fibonacci sequence here. So it basically comes in, if the enemy's wave is less than 3, so if it's 1 or 2, then it just defaults to 1 because I want it to go one enemy, and then it starts doing it on the infinite one. And then the current wave, it comes in, starts at number 2 because that's what wave we started at, gets the current wave, which would be 3, adds the previous to the current together, then sets the next variable, then it sets the current to the previous, and then the current to the next kind of thing. It sets it up and then calculates it, and then returns at the end the new current version. So it calculates it every time. And that's pretty much what starts the infinite waves going off, and it works really well and doesn't really break down often at all, really. But jumping back into the story side of it, it calls this story enemy, and whilst the functions really are very, very similar, there are some minor differences to it. So for some reason, I've duplicated the logic up here. I think I was rushed for time. So basically, it does the same thing where it loops over the enemies, loads them into memory, populates the variable, when the length equals the same, set the amount of enemies, get the unused doors, and then that's all the same. The only difference is really these ending bits down here, where it creates an enemy for each one. The only real main difference is when you complete a wave this time, it completes the narrative data task with the wave name. So if I load up my narrative task, which I only have 2, story mode, you can see I've basically got a task for every single enemy in the game kind of thing. So right at the start, we've got wave 1, and then once it gets past this branch and gets to this state, we're basically start waiting for... Oh, so on this one, you need to kill Sheldon. Once you kill Sheldon, it comes to here, it starts the King's dialogue, it moves to wave 2, wave 3, blah, blah, and it just keeps going on. And that's all this little bit here does. And then it removes enemies and then carries on, because this one doesn't loop back around. So when you kill all the enemies, that's it. The game stops until the dialogue of the King. So if I come and load up one of the King's dialogue, so if I load up Act 1, it comes in, it says a bunch of stuff, and then only right at the end, it starts the story enemy, which calls the Wave Spawner's story enemy event there. And each of these story enemy starts it. And that's pretty much the Wave Spawner. It's a component I drop on the player. Yeah, like I say, it works quite well. I'm happy with it, and it seems to be doing the job. The AI is a new version. I've not used AI behavior trees in here. I've used state trees, and it came down to, I saw a post online. If I remember to put it in the description, I'll put it in. But basically, somebody was saying, how can I achieve this behavior in behavior trees? I want this AI to work this way. And the first commenter was, you're using behavior trees wrong. Behavior trees are for transitioning and fading between certain bits, whereas what you're asking for is a state tree. And I was like, okay, state trees, let's have a look at them. And it's an experimental product in Unreal that is now, as of 5.3, an official product, but it lets you easily manage the AI based on Boolean values instead. So that's pretty much how I always created my behavior trees. So I said, if they're idle state, do this. If they're attack state, do this. If they're running state, do this. That's exactly what my trees did. So I figured it's probably not the best time to do it in the middle of a game jam, but you know, you've always got some time to learn. Let's do it. I started looking into state trees. There's a random guy on YouTube who's giving out all the latest updates, fantastic videos. So yeah, as you can see, this is my state tree. So I'll collapse it down. It basically says root, come in, go into the move section, move towards. It says if my distance from the AI to the player is greater than a set distance, which is what I've set on this variable here. So I've set it to something like, I think it's something like 2,300. So if the distance is greater than 2,300, it means the player is far away. So then use the task move to player to make them walk towards the player to gain the distance back. And then once they've arrived there, it plays the taunt voice, which basically says, hey, don't run away from me, you coward, kind of thing. And then that's it. After that, it goes back up to root and comes back up to here. Then it comes down, move, check move towards. Well, we've already moved towards them. Do we need to back away from them? So have they been running towards us and the player been running towards them? If we've run too close to them, I think it's set to like 1,500 or something. It does the check again. Otherwise, it tells them to move away from the player, so that makes them walk backwards. And then only if both of them fail, because they're in that sweet spot, so 1,500 to 2,500, so they've got 1,000 shooting distance, then they'll call attack, which basically comes in and says aim at the player, which basically sets their state to aiming. That's it. It's just for the animation blueprint. Then I've got a delay in here, which is where I control the difficulty. So if I had cowboys, you know, the aim, bang, shoot, you'd die within seconds kind of thing. So this aim delay has a random duration on it. I think it's something like 0.2 with a random effect of like 0.3 or 2 or something. And so it basically pauses them aiming at you. And then it logs their last shooting position because they focus on the player as you walk around. I didn't want them to aim at you, follow you around the arena and then shoot you, because then there's no difficulty. You can never escape the bullets. So this log shooting position, as soon as the aim delay's finished and they're like, right, I'm going to shoot, they log the position they're looking at, so the player has a very short amount of time to jump out of the way. A shooting delay is how quickly they can pull the trigger. I think that's set to like 0.1. And then they go attack, which shoots the gun, hitting the point on the floor, bang, they shout an attack at you, you know, ha, I got you, if they actually hit the player. And then after shoot delay is them recovering from the shot, just to add some more behavior. I was imagining what would happen if I shot a gun. So I'd aim, I'd make sure I've got the shot, which is the aim delay. I'd go, right, I'm going to shoot that position there, which is the log shooting position. I'd fire, which would, you know, play the attack. I'd go, ha, I got it. And then I'd recover after looking at it and carry on. That's pretty much what I've done. And these 3 delays here is how I increased or removed the difficulty. I did have to change the attack damage slightly, but just upping the amount they shot you worked wonders, to be honest. But yes, that's the state tree. Super, super easy once you get used to it. Very buggy. Definitely needs some work. For instance, the final day of the game jam was Saturday, and I'd been up from 6 a.m. working on the game non-stop all day because I had loads to do. That's fine. I got to around 8 p.m. and I was planning to quickly get some last bosses in, but then I ran into an issue that every time I built the game or every time I tried to run the game, it would crash, and I couldn't figure out why. The error was extremely vague. It was just saying state tree, the left-hand parameter does not have a value. Something like that. What's a left-hand parameter? I had no idea. What it actually meant was if you you come into one of these what has a check, like this move towards here, this source is your left-hand value, the target is your right-hand value. Some of them do actually say left and right, but for the life of me, I can't find it. But the odd one did say left or right, and that's what I was getting stuck on. I think if I add a boolean, yeah, left and right, that's what it meant, but it didn't tell me which one or which state tree. So originally, for each enemy I have 7 enemies there and some generic ones. I was going for 7 state trees because you have to pick the specific actor here, which will be controlling it. And annoyingly, you can't pick abstract blueprints. So I have a generic blueprint here that you can't drag into the game. You can't pick it. So I did the only other thing I could think and used a specific NPC. So I set 7 state trees up. I then realized I could take one step up and just use pawn and it works fine. So I did that instead. So I started going through getting rid of the other state trees until I only had one left, but I forgot I had some state trees somewhere else. So the error was referencing another state tree that I'd not touched yet, erroring because it had an enter condition on it, and it basically bricked the entire game. It wasn't even using it. I don't know why it's compiled it, but I guess you can change state trees at runtime, so that's probably why. But yes, that took me from 8 PM till 3 AM in the morning, and then an hour the day after because I was so tired I had to go to bed. It took me that long to figure it out because I basically just started deleting all the nodes from the state tree, the working one, because I was only using that, trying to figure it out. No, it was still erroring. So then I started recreating the state tree. Nope, still erroring. I started changing how I pass all this data into it, because before I was using a primary data asset, because you know I like my primary data assets. So I had this here. I had my primary data assets, which basically says, so I had all the generic soldier stats here. So this is how far they attack, how long they take, really nice and easily organized. I used to use that. I thought, oh, maybe because it's new, it was erroring because of that. So I removed it and then did this horrible evaluator, which pretty much runs when the tree first runs, gets the AI stats from it, and then populates all these variables. Horrible way of doing it. I thought that might have been the issue. Nope, didn't affect it. It wasn't until I started binning every single state tree and then came back in, it fixed it. And it was all because of an old state tree. But yeah, state trees, they are fantastic. And I'd been up from 6 AM working on the... If you imagine doing this in a behavior tree, you'd be ripping your eyes out before you even got to the bottom because you have to follow all the nodes down. It's really difficult. Whereas this, you can just look at and know what it's doing. So yeah, it works really, really well for me. So that's state trees. I'll be definitely using them again. What other things can I show you? So in the UI, I just have a dead basic HUD. It's got the wave counter on top, which is just a text box that you update. That's not used in story mode at all. I have this scale box here, which contains this progress bar with an overlay. And it basically just, as I remove the value here, %, it takes your health down. If it hits 0, then it just shows dead there. It's using a widget switcher. I absolutely love widget switchers. I used to manually show and hide panels. I stopped doing that now. I just use a widget switcher. You just say, go to this panel, go to this panel, go to this panel, go to this panel. Dead easy. Really, really nice. So changing levels now. If I jump into my maps folder, I've got a couple of maps. As you can see, I have Arena 1. The original intention was to build Arena 1, 2, 3, 4, have different sizes. But this arena here actually took me like a day and a bit to actually model and put in. I used the Cinti Roman pack. So this pack is one I used for the Colosseum because I figured who would have Colosseum style things, the Romans would. In the end, I couldn't actually find one. Can I actually see the picture here? Yeah, so this is hit there. That's my Colosseum there at the bottom. And you can see the steps are there, but it's a proper circle. So it goes round. If I duplicate this again, I have a very small arena and I didn't want that because it wasn't working. So what I did to get this is, you can't actually tell, but it is kind of still a proper circle. I've just duplicated more. And all I did, just very cheatingly, is I just scaled it up to 4. And then that worked. And you can see this is why the NPCs are so tiny. These are meant to be steps that you can walk up really easily because, you know, you're meant to stand down here and be as tall as like the 5th step almost. But I couldn't figure it out. I didn't want to model it. I didn't have the time. So I just scaled it up and it fixed my problem really. After that, it's just a case of modeling some walls around here. So I just got some walls, put them around, got some rooms. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I did originally use the landscape, but there is a bug in the latest versions of Unreal that I found an Unreal post for, where the landscape and the world partition don't play nice together. So half the time you'd load the game up and none of your assets would be loaded because the world partition was waiting for the landscape was waiting for the world partition to tell it to load or something weird like that. So it was never spawning and it was never working. So you'd start the game, you'd fall through the floor, and then you'd restart the game and it'd work correctly or something. So in the end, I binned the landscape off and then just added a giant plane instead, and that worked really well. Then I got some of these sand dune things from Cinti packs, added it in, got some rocks, and that's the landscape really. But yes, I did plan to have multiple arenas that you could jump through. Didn't have time for that. So if we jump to the main menu, you can see dead basic main menu. The original plan for this was to have have like a world there with the time Centurion jumping around it, where you can see him fade on with an effect, top-down level, teleport someone away and do it, then it'd change to a different scene, and it'd just be showing him going through time, picking people up, which I thought would have been epic for a main menu. Didn't have time. No way did I have time to do that. So I scrapped that, and you've now got a black main menu. But you've basically got the how to play, which uses a widget switcher to change, credits and benchmark and quit. That's it. Dead basic main menu. If I come to the intro text, this is the first thing you see in the game. So I've just got Cinti's Galaxy Sphere. That's pretty much it. And then when you click play, it plays some music. Ooh, I've moved the camera. I shouldn't have done that. I meant to be inside there, but it basically comes up and plays some text. And all that is a UI element that I manually animate up. That's it. But intro text, you can see I have it here, giant bunch of text, and all I've got is an animation for the main intro text that literally just moves it up and then starts moving the second one up, plays some tense music, fades the animation, and then when it reaches the end, it changes level. That's it. Nice and easy, quick effect, but it sets the lore, because I didn't have time to put all this lore in, do some animated thing, voice it. I didn't have time to do any of that. So yeah, that's basically what I did for that. The next map is the credits. I pretty much use the same layout for credits in all my games, but next time I've actually got a better idea. So it'll come and it'll play some music, and it'll say, time gladiators, congratulations on finishing the game, blah blah blah. Oh yeah, so that'll keep playing apparently, but it'll basically come down and give you all the details about the game. And I don't actually do this the same way as I do the intro, because the credits were getting really long, and the intro is a set fixed amount, but with the credits it changes every time. I didn't want to be setting the animation length every single time to make sure it didn't scroll too fast. So you can see it's coming down saying the king. What I actually wanted to do here was when it comes to the actor, I wanted it to play a line of theirs. So the king will say, "Ah, blah blah blah." Sheldon will go, "We're here, boys." Frank, you know, it played lines from the characters, which I thought would be really cool for the credits and very interactive. But I didn't have time. But yes, the credits works very uniquely. I open the credits folder. It's got its own widget here with it on, and it's got an empty scroll box inside here. And all I do is I store everything in a data table called DT credits that I can come and populate with all my different things here. So it's got all the people who played it. It's got whether it needs an image, what type is it a header or text, and then it loops through this data table, and then depending on the stats of it, it creates the specific type of it. So if it's a title, it comes up and creates the credits title row. So if I open this one up, it's literally just a text box that says like that. It just plays the title. That's all it does. Otherwise, it comes to the next one, which is the text, and this is the one that literally just says, it says thanks for playing, it says this game was for the Brackies Game Jam, blah blah blah. It just plays that line by line. Otherwise, it comes down to the character option down here, and there's two characters. There's a left character and a right character, and that's because I didn't want them all to be the same line. So all it does is it randomizes, it picks whichever one to play next. It'll go this one, this one, this one, this one, and that's where it gives the effect of the credits being separate. But yeah, that's it. It's one thing I coded a while ago. I just keep reusing it because it works really well, and then I just flip the images on, off, on, off, on, off. And then all it does on event tick, if start scrolling is enabled, which it enables down here, we don't even need the animation anymore because that was a legacy thing, and it basically just ever so slightly moves it up, just like that. There is actually a bug that when you get to the end of the credits, it just keeps strolling. It doesn't do anything. So I need to just make it quit the credits if you get to that, but at the moment you just come up and click skip or quit. And ladies and gentlemen, I think that's it. I've covered a huge part of the game. I've got loading screens in using the async loading screen plugin that I've got the tutorial for. I've got the arena. I've got them shooting me and stuff like that. I guess the only other bit I forgot is the randomness of it. So I keep saying the game's random, and it is pseudo-random. So for example, if I come and open the King's dialogue, say Act 1, I tried to randomize a lot of his dialogue. So a lot of these lines actually have two lines, and then it'll randomly pick one. And then each line has it coming down, different lines, and it'll randomize which line it plays. So every time you play it, you'll think you know what he's going to say, but it'll say something completely different in the wrong order, but it still follows the same story. So for example, the first line says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I am your king. Take it away, Chris." So there, it plays that one. But then what it might do is come and play, "People, I am your king," instead. Just like that. So it plays something different. And not every dialogue has it. Like this one here, it just says, "Let's see what behind this door. Frank, Sheldon, Benny come out." That's fine. But another unique aspect I have got to the game is this time I've included swearing. Now, if you've ever seen my games before or my channel, I don't do swearing often, but for this game with Space Pirates, it worked really well. But the rules said you weren't allowed anything that wasn't suitable for work, and swearing, depending where you work, isn't suitable for work. So I added an option flag onto the main menu. So if I open up my main menu widget here, if I go to my widget switcher again and go into the game options here, you have this NSFW words on or off. And all this does is enable a flag, and the same with the story in Infinite. On my game instance, here, it calls start game, this function I've created when you click story or infinite mode. And all this does is append to the get game instance whether it's swearing yes or no, and whether it's story mode yes or no. And And then on the arena, on the level blueprint, I basically come in, I set the input mode, and I get whether it's a story. If it's a story, I play the intro. If it's not a story, I just play the king's free dialogue. The swearing is just stored on a variable on the game instance. And what that's allowed me to do is if I come to my dialogue in my narrative folder, if I pick Raven Blackwood here, you can see I have a condition on some of the dialogues here which says is swearing enabled. And now I will say, ladies and gentlemen, this is your warning. If you're watching this and you don't like swearing, skip 10 seconds, 20 seconds in the future, because you will see some swearing, but it's only light swearing. It's nothing really offensive. But you come here, it says if swearing is enabled, well, that one doesn't contain swearing, but this one here will say a swear word in the middle of it. But I'm not going to carry that on. And then if it's swearing is disabled, then it'll play a different one. And it basically tells narrative when this player needs to call the idle animation, so that's when they enter, or when they attack you, it calls it, and then it will randomize which node it needs to go to, depending on whether swearing is enabled or disabled. Such a small feature, but it works really well. You honestly look at the king differently. When you look at him and he's like, "Yar me hearties, let's do a fight" kind of thing, versus when he's effing and blinding, going, "We're gonna destroy these people" kind of thing. It really adds a twist to the game, but it works so well. So yeah, so that's the swearing mode I enabled on there. So jumping back to the randomness, I've said that the NPC is randomized. I'm pretty sure these still randomize on construct. So yeah, as I move them, they randomize. And the same is for the NPCs who you fight as well. Then if I come in and pick the generic American soldier here, he's inherited from BPA enemy, and it's got this randomize enemy function here. And what this basically does is get the random details for this specific enemy from a data table, passing in the name of the enemy. So if I pass in American soldier, it will go and load all this data here. So it'll be all the different meshes he can be, all the different materials, all the different hats he can have, whether it can be bold. The random weapons I didn't end up actually doing. I was hoping to be able to give him different guns, like a submachine gun, a pistol, something like that, and randomize it. In the end, that's not actually been done, unfortunately, but maybe the future. And a random voice, so between Sheldon, Frank, and Benny. Eventually, the plans were to have multiple versions of these characters. So you'd have 3 Sheldons, 3 Franks, 3 Bennys. So you'd hear the same dialogue, but it'd be a completely different voice, which would have been extra randomness for the game. And each character does this. They have a random set of things, meaning when I drop her in, she's got a helmet there, which covers her face with her gun. If I click randomize enemy, it changes her colours and her helmet, but she's still retaining a helmet to match her personality. The guns, they're pretty much there as well. They randomize the material sometimes. Not all the enemies have been set up for it, but yeah. And then she was originally meant to have a jetpack. I never managed to get around to that. The point was you'd shoot her until half life, then she'd shoot up and she'd fly around shooting bombs at you and you have to shoot it down. That unfortunately got scrapped when I had the issue with the state tree. But yeah, so it gets the random enemy details and then it comes in, breaks it down, randomizes the mesh, randomizes the hat, blah 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 blah, just randomizes it all. The only caveat to this is if they've already got a voice pack selected, then it won't do it. And the reason I've done this is on infinite mode, when you select generic enemies, it uses them, it'll randomize their voice. So one time you'll get Frank, one time you'll get Benny, one time you get Sheldon, one time it'll just randomize continuously. But with the story, I can't say come on out Sheldon and Benny come out, because Benny literally says, "Hey, it's Benny," kind of thing. I can't do that. So what I've done is took to having named blueprints for the named characters. So for example, let's open Benny. If I go into his details, I've already pre-assigned his AI stats and his selected voice pack. So at that point, the randomizer won't change that. It will be the same. And all this is just a data asset of the voice lines that everyone has. So it says what's their name, so I can render their name on screen. And then it says what dialogue file are they using. So this is Benny's dialogue file, this one here. And then it says what line do we call for each area. So when they're attacking you, it plays the sound, or they're taunting you, it will go and find this one on Benny's track. So that one, I believe, is like that one is the attack one. So it come in here, it randomly pick one. And because Benny's a cool character, and it'll play Benny's thing. So that's why the game is random. And I was hoping to do random arenas as well. That didn't work. Random NPCs, random baddies, random lines, random guns. Yeah, random. So it makes it a bit different every time you play. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That is my game. I think I've broke down a lot of the game. I've tried my best to do it. If I've missed anything and you want to see it, let me know. I can cover it. If you want me to cover something in more detail with a tutorial, let me know. Please don't ask for a state tree tutorial. I'm not ready for that one yet, but I can give you a very basic gist of it if you want. But yes, this is my game. I thoroughly enjoyed making this game. I am looking forward to seeing what people think of it. I'm going away to play other people's games now. So yes, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. I hope you like this new style of video. If you do, let me know and I'll continue doing them for the next game jams I've done. My name is D3kryption and I will see you next time.